on Ford Performance. Once again, I'm out here in the garage at the table for another episode of Garage Table Discussions. Now, right now, I am out here in the garage at the table. But this episode, well, it's actually going to be a few episodes. This is going to be a multi-part episode. Over the next 4 days, you are going to get to be watching the interview I did with Mr. John Clor from Ford Performance. John will talk about a multitude of things, give us a little bit of history of Ford Performance from the iterations as early as SVO to SVT, Ford Racing, a little bit of everything. He's also going to have some great stories about Ford in general and Mr. Gail Halderman. This episode, I was fortunate enough to meet up with John at the Halderman Barn Museum, and we sat down for basically about an hour. So I've broken this up over the next 4 days, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed filming it. Because John, hey, let's face it, he's quite the character, but he's got some great stories. All right, so enjoy and join me over the next couple of days for all the rest of the episodes. All right, let's get to it. Hey gang, it's Jeff Black here from Beachmont Ford Performance. We've got another special edition of Garage Table Discussion on the road. I'm sitting here with this young gentleman named John Clor. John, thanks for joining me today, man.
Jeff, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure. If you don't know who John Clor is, you're going to find out. So John, tell me a little bit about you and your history at Ford. And I know we can talk about the history of Ford Performance, which goes back a few different iterations, I guess we could call it.
It does. My title is Enthusiast Communications Manager. As far as I know, nobody's got an Enthusiast Communications Manager, no other car company. And the reason is Ford has more car clubs for its car brands than any other brand out there. So almost every Ford, think about it, almost every Ford has a club. Do you know that the Pinto Car Club of America has 5,000 members?
No, I did not know that.
Wow. So now they realize that when people who own a Ford, they don't just buy a car and trade it in. Most people who are enthusiasts keep their Fords, form a club, and cherish and celebrate ownership of these cars. So they're brand ambassadors. So why not interact with them and give them the feeling of happiness and connection that they need to go forth and preach the Ford gospel. What does that say? Jesus didn't preach the gospel by himself. He had 12 buddies.
This is true.
Well, the clubs are our disciples, and they go forth and preach the Ford gospel. So my job is to communicate and support them at Ford. But I'm not a typical Ford guy. I hate to break it to you, but I'm not the typical marketing guy. I went to Yale or Harvard, and I'm a Detroit kid. Grew up in Detroit. Went to inner city Detroit high school. Went to Wayne State University. I wanted to be a weatherman because you can get 6 figures and be wrong all the time.
And keep your job.
Yeah, and they say, hey, what happened? You said it was going to rain. It was going to be sunny. Well, the wind shifted.
The front changed.
Bingo. But I got involved at the Detroit News because it was a better paying job than selling shoes. And it put me through college. And you know who Jimmy Olsen was, don't you?
That
Jimmy
name
Olsen.
is, yeah.
Think about the Superman.
Yeah, okay.
He was the copy boy at the Daily Press.
Yes, that was you.
Well, I started as a copy boy.
Yeah.
And after 15 years, I was the sports copy chief in the sports department of the Detroit News. Oh. And we won AP awards. I loved it, but I always wanted to write about cars.
Okay.
And I wanted to do something with cars. And if I couldn't be a weatherman, I said, well, I was there for a job, and it lasted 15 years, right? The problem with the newspaper is, Jeff, I got to tell you, it's a bad, you're there every day. It's like horrible. I had Tuesdays and Thursdays off.
Yeah.
So when my buddy jumped ship, I wanted to be the car writer at the Detroit News. And a guy named Bob Irvin was our auto beat reporter. And Bob wouldn't retire. When I left the news, I think Bob was 106 or 108.
Seriously?
No. Wow. I just couldn't wait for him to retire. So I jumped ship, and my buddy, who was the national desk editor, and I was a sports copy, we jumped to Auto Week magazine.
Okay, yeah.
Now, if you guys ever heard of Auto Week, it's the magazine for the people back then who didn't want to wait a whole month. They had to have their car stuff every week.
Right.
So that's for the crazy people.
Yeah.
So we loved it. You know, the car companies, I was real skinny. Car companies flew us around the world, and we drove cars on the coast of, Italy, and it was wonderful. Why would you leave that job, Jeff? Why would you leave a job like that? Where you could
It'd be hard.
Yeah.
It would be hard.
So I thought long and hard about how I would retire from driving. One night you drive a Ferrari, the next night BMW, then a Mercedes Benz. If you worked late that night, you drove the Kia, the Silverado pickup.
Tough life.
Yeah. Well, my buddy again said, John, I'm quitting Auto Week. And I was a deputy managing editor. He was managing editor. So I'm thinking, if he quits, guess who's managing editor?
Mm-hmm.
I said, why would you quit this job? I mean, writing about cars, we have weekends off and holidays, and we get treated, wined and dined by the car companies. He said, because my dad worked at Ford. He was the chief engineer, or one of the engineers, on the retractable hardtop. So can you imagine, that guy's probably in an insane asylum. How many miles of wires and switches were in that guy? His dad's probably was crazy. But anyway, he said, I wanted to work at Ford, and they started something called SVT.
Okay.
And I said, what does that mean? A special vehicle team. We're going to sell hot rod Mustangs and pickup trucks. But it's a niche group, it's a skunk works. We're going to be separate from Ford in our own little building. I said, wow, how cool. He goes, but here's the kick. We won't have advertising. No advertising? How are you going to sell them? He goes, we're going to sell them through the buff books. So they're going around and taking all these guys from Motor Trend, Car and Driver, Road Truck, Auto Week, and they pick them. So because we know all the other guys, and we're going to put them on the covers, and people are going to read about them, and that's how they'll learn about Cobras and
There you go.
So I said, well, good luck with that.
It didn't sound like a good idea at the time.
I mean, I thought it was going to fail.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and I knew about SVO.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the history of the skunk works at Ford, I mean, there was the Ford Racing division, and some guy with some chicken farmer with some dungarees came to Ford, and he wanted to get engines out of Ford. For what?
The guy was going to go nowhere.
Yeah. He went over to GM. This is the rumor that when I got to meet Carroll and talk to him, I asked him about all these stories about him, and he came to Detroit not for Ford, for General Motors.
Yeah.
He wanted to get small block V8s.
Okay.
But when they threw him out, Bunky Knudsen, who was a VP over there, couldn't stand him. Some crazy chicken farmer in dungarees come over here. And he said, well, while I'm in Detroit, I better go talk to Ford, and I'll show those Corvette guys, that my Cobra, if I can get a motor for it, 260s or 289s. So when he showed up, it was to see Ford Racing, Jacques Passano, and Hal Sperlich. They said, you got to meet Mr. Iacocca. So when he first met Iacocca, thought he was just wild man. But he said, what do you want these engines for? And you know what Carroll said? Oh, I'm going to go beat some Corvettes. And Iacocca said, how many engines do you want? There's the difference between getting thrown out of GM and coming up. And so that is how Ford Racing really got, let's face it, this is the year about Ford versus Ferrari. Ford Racing changed the world for the company when it went after Ferrari, with their GT40 program. Now, we weren't successful in our first couple of years. Failure brings that. But to go out in 1966 and go there and to face the most feared car in the biggest spectacle in the world, which was Le Mans.
Oh, yeah.
And to beat those guys. Now, did we do it with finesse? No. We had a knuckle-dragging 427 big block in this beautiful car and kicked them. And 1, 2, 3, and did it again. And so that gave Ford Racing street cred. And we really needed it, because back then, if you remember, this was the muscle car era. This is in the 60s,
Right.
And no offense to all these beautiful things that Gail Halderman drew here in the museum, but even the 289 Hypo 65 Mustang was no match for a 396 Camaro or Chevelle. Big blocks were the thing, and Ford had to chase that. They chased us with the pony car, but we had to chase it. So Ford Racing was really important. Yeah. And it got people involved like Tasker Ford to build the 390 cars, and then it forced Ford to put 390s, big blocks in our car. And then the 390s were, they came back and they said, I got my rear end handed to me by a Chevy or a 396.
Yeah.
So we said, well, the 390s ain't working. That caused the Cobra Jet, the 428s. And that's when Mustang became a muscle car.
Right.
If it weren't for Ford Racing doing all those things, Mustang wouldn't have the legacy that it has today. So Ford Racing was important, and I understood all that. But then it kind of, in my lifetime, Ford got out of racing. I mean, remember the 70s when my second generation car came along? Guess what, Jeff?
Yeah.
They said no racing at all, no factory-backed racing at all.
Right.
Now, if you worked at Ford, you were handing engines out the back door to some racer.
Oh, yeah.
But there was no official support. So racing was deemed un-American, wasting gasoline and going around in circles and loud and obnoxious. So, and then it's happened a couple of times, and it may happen again. Pretty soon we'll just have slot car races. Yeah, so Ford Racing's value to the company, in my estimation, was when Henry Ford needed money to start Ford Motor Company, and not far from where I live in Detroit, right down the road actually, there was an old place, this was a horse track, but they wanted to race Alexander Winton, and Ford had his own little race car, and got on there in front of investors and raced Alexander Winton's Winton, which was one of the most spectacular, expensive automobiles of its time, and Ford's gonna show you, my engineering is better than yours. And now, he did race him, and he beat him, and now Henry almost fell off. Do you know when was the last time he ever raced? That first race was his first and last, but he got the money to found Ford Motor Company. So racing is important to the history of Ford. So for me, to come to a skunk works, but then I learned a lesson as a journalist. I said, well, I know about SVO. So all those years that Ford was doing well in muscle cars, and then we went through the malaise era. We had all the look, and we had the show without the go, because we had to get fuel economy and emission standards. Jeff, think about the Fox Body years, those early Fox Bodies with 255 V8s and 118 horsepower.
Right.
It was sad.
Yeah, but really none of the manufacturers in that era had anything that was...
No, even the big blocks were 140. I mean, a Corvette was 140 horsepower. So bottom line for us was we had to engineer our way out of it. We can't just say, I want all the glory of Mustang back in the 80s. We had to battle it. Little by little, we got it back. By the time the 5.0 came rolling around, people started to remember this era. And that was important for Ford Racing at the time to do something. So a bunch of engineers got together and they said, if you're not gonna build another hot car, we're gonna use technology now to make performance. So these engineers got together, they dragged a guy out of BMW, a guy named John Clor was their marketing director, and they sat down and said, what if we took a Mustang, a Fox body, and we stuck a high-performance 2.3-liter turbocharged four-cylinder that could outperform a small block V8? And what if we put bigger brakes and bigger tires and 5 lugs and all the things, great seats, all the things that a driving enthusiast would want?
Right.
And they formed a special vehicle operation. Now, special vehicle operations was a catalog. SVO catalog was where you got the parts. But they figured if you could build the parts for a cool Mustang, you could build a Mustang, right? So they put their parts together, sent it down the line as the SVO Mustang, and I thought they'd sell 10,000 a year. You know why, Jeff? They said the car that would sell itself. Newsflash, nothing sells itself. They couldn't sell 10,000 in the whole run of the 3.5 years of SVO. So we learned a lesson there. And the lesson was this: nothing sells itself. You have to promote it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we didn't have trained dealers. So you walked into a dealership with an SVO Mustang next to a Mustang GT, roughly the same price, and maybe the GT was cheaper. And you were buying your car from a guy with lime green pants and a white belt.
Who knew nothing about what the cars were.
Thank you.
And also, we got to remember too, in that era, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have this net as far as, marketing anything. So, if you didn't tell people it's there, nobody knew it was
Or
there.
if your dealership didn't have a guy who knew performance,
Yeah.
he just, I don't know, let's get this wing on it, And so they didn't sell.
Yeah.
The problem with that is dealers needed to be trained, and you need to have, and not every dealer should sell performance cars. Some of them are in a mom and pop era where some dealers get it and they understand they have the customers, and some don't.
Yeah.
So when SVT was created, it was created by Bob Ruhe, who was the head of Ford Markets, like today's Jim Farley. And then Neil Ressler, the head of Ford product, like today's Hao Tai Tai. When the top product guy and the top marketing guy say, I want to create a skunk works, you guys go over there and go create high performance variants of our cars. You sell them, you market them by yourself, and we'll leave you alone. Wow.
Yeah.
So the opportunity came where my buddy went over there as a PR manager. He said, I need a communications guy. We got to do something. There's something coming out called the internet. They were going to do something called a website, whatever that was.
Yeah.
So they needed someone to do that. And I said, you know what? It was okay until he started coming home with weird stuff. Like he came home with a Escort with a Cosworth turbo with and a Cosworth turbo. And they don't make this, I know. And then one day he came over with a Windstar with a V8 in it, a Ranger pickup with a show motor in it.
Yeah.
Who does this stuff? Well, the SVO guys, the SVT guys.
Yeah.
They used to be called SVO Engineering, but it was SVT. So I said, I got to go.
Yeah.
So I jumped ship in 1995. My first program was the 1995 Cobra R. 351.
Yeah.
Remember that thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I thought I was going to retire from Ford doing performance variants, but suddenly after 10 years, SVT was disbanded because there was a change in philosophy, change in leadership. Ressler and Rui retired.
Yeah.
And once John Clor was our chief engineer, he said, we lost our air cover. And when you're on the ground without air cover, you don't survive long.
Right.
So SVT was disbanded, and they said, what do you do? I go, I do the website. Well, you're gone. Oh, but wait a minute. If I kill the SVT website, there'll be no GT500, nothing will be online. Oh, it's on the Ford site. No, it's not. Okay, you go to Ford Racing. So that's why I wanted for racing. So we created, we had a magazine, and SVT magazine, we incorporated that into the racing magazine.
Yeah.
Then we folded, when that went belly up, when the recession came in 2005, I came up with an idea, why not say, no, we're killing your magazine, say, we'll give you an email. So instead of 12 issues of magazine, I gave them 52 emails called Fast News from Ford Racing. So I got to be in charge of that, come up with enthusiast-focused content. And why would I know that? I came from SVT. I wasn't enthused.
Right.
And they said, how do I direct content towards your customer? I am the guy. I'm the guy.
Yeah.
And I did that for a while, Jeff, but then I had an epiphany.
Okay, there you have it. Part 1 of our 4-part episode with Mr. John Clor. Be sure to join me tomorrow for the next part. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.